Okay, let's get started. Here we go. So we have been studying Noah and the... All right, or the flood. That's cool too. Noah and the flood, Noah and the ark, Noah and the whatever, the animals, it's all good. But we've been studying Noah, and we started real slow, and then we kind of picked up the pace because I'm not good at keeping track of calendars, and I realized we only have so much time to finish before we can get into the holidays. And so here we are at the conclusion of the story of Noah. Corruption has taken over the world. Since the beginning, when sin entered in for the first time, it has continued to develop and develop and develop and spread and spread and spread. And it has essentially got to the root of every man, to where at the bottom, at the root of the heart of every man and every woman was evil. And God sees this corruption on the world and says that it must end. And therefore, God brings the flood. And so we spent some time last week working through the flood, a little bit about the animals that are on the ark. And so here we go. We're going to pick up in the story. They are on the ark. The rain has begun. The flood essentially has begun. And we enter into chapter 8. We're going to go all the way through chapter 8 and then a little bit into 9 and then be done. All right? So it's going to be great. This is a conclusion. This is the promise from God in Noah and the ark, and the flood, or the animals, whatever you want to call it. Here we go. Chapter 8, verse 1. But God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the livestock that were with him in the ark. So here they are. They're in the ark. Remember, the ark is a rectangle, all right? It doesn't look like a normal ship now. It's a rectangle. There's no way for them to steer it. They were completely in God's control, floating on the water. Remember, it was really essentially as close to unsinkable as could be. The ratio that the ship was built in, it would literally have to flip all the way up to a 90-degree angle to even have a chance of flipping over. So God gave Noah specific instructions about building the ark, and those specific instructions made it essentially unsinkable. So here they are. They have no way to control the ship. They are just traveling and trusting the Lord to move them through this journey. And God says he remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the livestock that were on the ark with Noah. And God made a wind blow over the earth, and the waters subsided. Okay, so the beginning of the drying process takes place. Okay, so wind comes through. This is similar to when the Red Sea was parted. God used wind again. Wind is kind of his way. He navigates through the water, reminding us he's in complete control. He blows a wind over the water. At the same time, remember, there was a canopy above that was holding all the water. That canopy has since burst. And so now sun is hitting the earth like it hasn't before. Remember, that's part of how people were able to live so long. And so the sun is coming through. A wind is blown through. And now just the basic evaporation is also taking place. So these three elements have begun. The drying process is taking place. And the fountains, verse 2, the fountains of the deep and the windows of the heavens were closed. The rains from the heavens were restrained. So the canopy's been busted. The water is all gone. The water coming from beneath, it has subsided. It has stopped. And now we land in the drying process. And verse 3 says this, and the waters receded from the earth continually. So it was a constant but slow process. At the end of 150 days, the water abated, meaning it started to come down. It really started to make progress. That's about 5 months, give or take. And in the 7th month, so 2 months later, in the 7th month, on the 17th day, the ark came to rest on the mountain of Ararat. Now, why the dates? Why all these dates? There'll be a few more. Obviously you're navigating through the story. Here's the main thing that we need to be reminded now. The reason there's dates, it is God telling us that this is history, not a fantasy, not a story, not some great thing you tell your kids to remind them to behave or they may get flooded. This is a true historical worldwide event that took place. And God is so strategic with the dates all the way down to the day. So that's just a reminder to us. It's easy as we listen to this story to start to, man, what a cool story. How great. That's so fascinating. I'll tell that to the youngsters one day. No. This is history. This is historical. This happened. And so the dates just are another way of reminding us on top of navigating us through the story. Verse 5, and the waters continued to abate. So it's a constant process until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. Finally, during all of this time, land for the first time is able to be seen. And what is it? The very tops of the mountains. Remember, the water was 20 feet, roughly 20 feet higher than the tallest mountain. That's how much water was on the earth. That's a lot of water. Okay, that's basically a review. 1 through 5 is a review. Here we go. Verse 6. At the end of 40 days. So after the water has begun to decrease, 40 days later, pause. Noah is a very patient man, is he not? Have we not seen that all the way through the story? How long did he build the ark? Do you remember? 120 years. You're not even going to live that long. If you do, it'll be in a hospital bed with people feeding you. You ain't going to make it. Noah, for 120 years, built this ark waiting for God's command to say the flood is going to come. Noah has been waiting on the ark for a long, long time. Noah is a very patient man. What is he waiting on? He is waiting on God to tell him what to do next. We'll come back to that point in a minute. Noah opened, so after the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark. Remember when they built the ark, they left that little crevice at the top. Remember that when we were talking about the construction? So he opens this window, the window of the ark. I lost my spot. That's great. Thank you so much. You have a beard, don't you? Yep. Explains it all. That he had made and sent forth a raven. How many of you have a pet raven? That'd be cool if you did. It flew in here. It'd be awesome. Why did Noah send a raven? Now, there's a couple of different thoughts. We're just going to kind of land on one tonight, and there may be spin another way. But here's the deal. Ravens are scavengers. Ravens eat anything. Anything. Which means a raven could eat whatever was left. What was left? The only thing that would be left would be people. It's the only thing left. I know, it's gross, but it's true. So the first thing out is a raven. Also a raven, we'll see a dove is coming next. You'll see why, but the raven was bigger. The raven was stronger. The raven could fly further. And so Noah sends out a raven first. And what's he doing? He's going to see, he's checking on the status. Checking on the status. Is this a week later? A month later? No. Months and months and months and months of waiting on the ark, closed in the ark, unable to even see, because it says for the first time they opened the window, they had no idea what was happening outside. All they heard was water and rain and water and rain, and then just water and floating and moving. If you get seasick, it was a miserable, miserable time. And they have been waiting, and finally they open the window and they send out the raven. Why? Because they have no idea what to expect. This has never happened before. It will never happen again according to God's promise. This is the first time ever a flood like this has ever taken place, and they had no idea. So they send out the raven first, the stronger bird that could make it, honestly, going from body to body, moving around, navigating, trying to find a place to make its home. So he sends out the raven. Should I have warned you about the graphicness there? I'm sorry. And so the raven went out, and it went to and fro until the waters were dried up from the earth. So it left and didn't come back. Now, some argue that it might have come back later, but it didn't come back immediately like the dove. According to, remember the story, everything came in pairs. So if Miss Raven was on the ark, most likely eventually they caught up. Otherwise, there wouldn't be ravens going forward. But either way is irrelevant. It doesn't say anything about it coming back. So it went out, and it didn't come back. And then he keeps going. Verse 8, then he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters have subsided from the face of the ground. Now, why does he send a dove? First, he sends a raven. Ravens are bigger. Ravens are stronger. Ravens are scavengers. They'll eat anything that crosses their path. But why a dove? Because a dove eats what? A dove eats vegetation. A dove eats plants. And so a dove would only find something that would be of plant. Okay, so Noah's now waiting. Okay, we know there's bodies out there because the whole world's been covered. So we know that. But now Noah is hoping to find some kind of vegetation, some kind of sign that life has begun to come back, that growth has begun. And so he sends out the dove and hope that something will happen. And then here's what happened. But the dove found no place to set her foot. And she returned to him to the ark, for the waters were still on the face of the whole earth. So he put out his hand, and he took her, and he brought her into the ark with him. So the dove goes out, gets exhausted, comes back, hasn't found anything. Then we continue, verse 10. So he, Noah, waited another 7 days. Another 7 days. How long has he been waiting? Forever. And he is so patient. You guys are like 7 days. I can't wait 3 days for anything. So we have Amazon and 2 day shipping. It's crazy. So he sends out, he waits 7 days, and again he set forth the dove out of the ark. What for? Same purpose. Verse 11, and the dove came back to him in the evening, and behold, in her mouth was a freshly plucked olive leaf. So this is interesting. It doesn't say floating, it says freshly plucked. So what does that mean? The plant was growing, the plant had begun to develop, and that dove was able to take the branch off the plant. So there is growth now. Now that doesn't mean the world's ready yet, but that means that growth has begun. This is exciting. This is good news, right? If you're on the ark for that long, this is great news, all right? I don't care if I got to live on a tree. I just want to get off the ark, even though I'm kind of on a tree in the ark. But that's a different story. I just want off. I want something new. So the sign of life, the sign of a tree, this is really good. All right, so a dove comes back with the olive leaf in its mouth. Now this is also, side note, interesting. I'm full of knowledge tonight, I hope. The olive leaf, or tree, olive tree, lasts longer than almost any other tree. Do you know that? And it can last longer than any tree underwater. The olive tree, when they cut off an olive branch and they want to use that to carve or to do whatever it is that they're going to do, it's full of what? Olive oil. That's where we get olive oil from. It's so full that when they cut off that branch, it has to sit for days, sometimes weeks, just to be able to dry out so that they can actually carve. So it is very rich inside. And so this is the kind of tree that could make it in water. Because you got to wonder, well, how did this one go first? Like what? Because the olive tree didn't necessarily survive the flood, because we know that, but it was probably one of the first ones to grow back because it sustained so well in water. So that's a little history of the olive tree. Now you are smarter because of it. All right, I got to stop leaving. I keep losing my spot. Print needs to be bigger in Bibles. Can I just publicly say that? Okay. Y'all all agree, right? See how I stalled there, but I should have stalled by looking down, so I would have saved time. Okay. So he waited another day. He waited another 7 days. Okay. Not flood plus like. So Noah knew that the water had subsided from the earth. Then he waited what? Another 7 days. This fool is patient. We need to all take notes, okay? All y'all are like, just get through the story, Chad. I can't wait 3 minutes. Come on. Then he waited another 7 days, and he sent forth the dove, and she did not return to him anymore. What does that mean? She found a home. This is exciting. This means that the first time she flew out, she was able to find a branch, but it wasn't enough for her to sustain life. She got out the second time, and she was able, that's our assumption, is she was able to find a home because she didn't come back. This is great. Now, you got to ask the question, okay, because I'm giving you a heads up in the story. Noah's not going to do anything until God says it's time to go. But God never told Noah to send the animals, did he? The dove or the raven. So you got to ask the question, well, was he being disobedient? Now, I wasn't there, so I can't fully answer yes or no. But my thought is this. If you ever read in Proverbs, I think it's Proverbs 3, it tells you what? Do not lean on your own understanding. It doesn't say don't have understanding, but it says do not lean only on your own understanding. What was Noah doing? He was getting an understanding. He was getting a status of the world. What has happened? What is going on? We've been waiting so long. Are we even going to be able to live again? Is this going to make it? What's going to happen? And so he goes out and he gets understanding of the situation, but Noah doesn't move an inch. Well, it doesn't move out of the ark until God says it's time. Now for us, this is very relevant because some of you guys are going to move through life like I have. And we're going to start looking and navigating, and maybe I'm interested in this profession, maybe I'm interested in maybe this degree, maybe I want to change a job. And so it's okay to get understanding. It's okay to seek guidance, to seek wisdom, to say, hey, I'm thinking about a change in my life. Is this a good move? And you seek wise counsel. But don't you dare move until the Lord says it's time for you to go. And that's the difference between leaning on our understanding and just going for it. And so Noah gets some understanding by sending out the dove and sending out the raven. But he doesn't do anything until the Lord says, okay. Verse 13, in the 601st year, in the first month, in the first day of the month, specific dates, the waters were dried from off the earth. This is roughly 1 year. And Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. In the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth had dried out. Even when the dove doesn't return, he's still waiting. He opens the covering, but he's still waiting. He could walk out at any moment, but he hasn't yet. Why? Because he's waiting on God. Then verse 15, probably Noah's greatest moment. Then God said to Noah, "Go out from the ark." What patience, waiting for God to speak. Go out from the ark, you and your wife and your sons wives with you. So all 8 of them. And bring out with you every living thing that is with you, of all flesh, birds and animals and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, that they may swarm on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. Does that sound familiar? Genesis 1. What did God say? Go, swarm the earth, be fruitful and multiply. You know what he's saying? He's saying we're going to start over. We're going to start over. We brought the flood, we brought the rain, and we're starting over just like in the beginning. Even though man screwed it up, here's another chance. Let's start all over. Then verse 18. So Noah went out, and his sons and his wives and his sons' wives with him. Every beast, every creeping thing, and every bird, everything that moves on the earth went out by the families from the ark. They moved in. You got to picture this. They've been waiting all this time. They open the door. They look out. They're still waiting for God's approval to go. And then he says, go. And they walk out. And you got to imagine it's just this beautiful sun is shining and flowers and all the... No. It was complete desolation. Complete desolation. There was probably sun. There wasn't much life yet. A little bit. We learned that when the dove didn't come back. But it was desolation. Most likely, I don't want to go too far here because I can't fully answer, but most likely there were still remains of bodies. Complete desolation from the end of the world. And so they move in and they start over. How glamorous, glorious it was, I'm not sure. But when we look at the story, I don't think it was a glorious coming home, but what a glorious moment. For God to say, Noah, your heart was right. You trusted me, and I brought you through. Now you and your family get to start over, and you get to take the beginning of the world and make it happen, to be fruitful and to multiply, to have babies, to make families, and to repopulate the earth. A beautiful moment mixed with a bitter reminder of what they had just gone through. And I do think when they got off the ark, like all of us, they were just dying to get off, because crammed in any space like that for that long, I just don't know how that could be enjoyable. But what a wake up when you come off and it's not the glorious picture you thought it might be. So here they are. They take a step off the ark. And then verse 20. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. When we talked about this, I think it was last week, God specifically told them there are certain animals that were going to be clean. Those animals were going to be for sacrifice. Those are going to be for an altar. What does Noah do? He steps off the ark, and the first thing he does is create a moment of worship to God. Now, it's a different type of worship than we're used to now. We don't do sacrifice anymore. We've had Christ on the cross, the ultimate sacrifice. We don't need sacrifice anymore. Christ has done all that for us. That's why it's such a big moment for us. But here in this moment, this is how they worship God. And Noah steps off, and they do a burnt sacrifice. They do a burnt offering. And why a burnt offering? Because a burnt offering would consume every piece of the altar. It would consume everything that was on the altar. And that was the sign that they are giving God completely their life. Every piece of it. Not a part of it, not just the best part, they're giving him everything. It was a sign of full surrender and full repentance. You got to remember, they were on the boat. They made it. Everyone else died. Everyone else died. And when they walked off that ark, Noah's first response is, I am going to worship, I'm going to repent, and I'm going to give God every piece of me. And I got to tell you, that would probably be our first reaction too, when you realize that you made it when no one else did. Have you ever had a moment where something crazy happened and you are just, maybe you're glad you're alive, maybe you're just glad you didn't get caught, maybe you're glad something didn't happen to you, and that overwhelming feeling, I am so grateful that that didn't happen to me. Imagine that times 100,000, because that's about what Noah and his family are feeling. God spared us when we didn't deserve it, and they walk off, and what's the first thing they do? They bow down and they worship God, complete surrender. And then 21, and when the Lord smelled the aroma, the Lord said in his heart, when the Lord smelled the aroma, it was pleasing. It was pleasing. Now, what was pleasing? It's not the actual aroma of the animals. That's not what's pleasing. What's pleasing is the heart of Noah. What's pleasing is the heart. Remember, people come and offer worship to God all the time, even now, even here. You come and offer worship to God, you sing songs, but if your heart is not right with God, it's not a pleasing aroma to him. And all throughout the Old Testament, you'll read about that, how it says that aroma wasn't pleasing to God. Why? Not because what they did was any different than anybody else, because of what they brought. Remember Cain and Abel. What was the problem? They both brought a sacrifice before the Lord, but one of them, their heart wasn't right. And so God refused to accept it. And so God looks down on humanity, the only ones left, 8 of them, and he sees their sacrifice. And why is it pleasing? Because he knows that their heart was finally in the right place. Noah steps in on behalf of all of future humanity, and he offers that moment of worship to God. And the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Okay, here we go. First, it says, I will never curse the ground again. Why? Have you ever thought about why we've lived so much longer than they did before the flood? They only lived about 1,600 years. We've made it, give or take, 4,400. Why have we lived so much longer? Because God promised he wouldn't do this again. Are we any better? No, many would argue that this world is, this time in history is more sinful than it's ever been, and I think they would be right. I would be one of the guys arguing, so I'm right. We are more sinful now than ever in history, mainly because we have more ways to be sinful. The longer we live, the more creative we get. The more creative we get, the more creatively sinful we become. But why have we made it this long? Because God promised, never again would I do this. Never again will I bring a worldwide universal destruction, a universal flood. Never again. Noah offers the sacrifice. And God continues, neither will I ever strike down every living creature as I have done. So it says, I'm never going to curse the ground again. Remember back in Genesis when man first sinned? That curse isn't gone. He just says, I'm never going to do anything like that again. And then the second part, bringing the universal flood, he says, I'm never going to do that again as well. And this isn't to Noah, okay? This is in God's heart. So really, Moses, who's writing this, is really hearing this, most likely for the first time. We're hearing it. Most likely, Moses is reading this going, could this still happen to us? Until this moment, he may think that this could still happen again, which would be rightful because Moses' people were sinful too. But in this moment, he realizes that God says, I will never do that again. Never. Even though man's heart is evil from his youth. Even though God knows that we are going to be sinful, that we are going to be messed up, we are going to be jacked up, God knows that. He knows it's going to be from the heart of man. That's been the problem all along. The root of the heart is evil. But God says, even though I will never do this again. Now that's mercy, guys, because listen, look in the world. We are so much more sinful now than ever before in history. Yeah, God's promised then, and obviously he's kept it because we're still here, that he would never bring that destruction that we deserve. In fact, he's going to bring a solution a little bit later. Verse 22. How long will it last? while the earth remains. As long as the earth is here, this won't happen. God in his heart says seed time and harvest, food is always going to be there. Cold and heat, controlled climate, it's always going to be there. Summer and winter, the seasons are always going to be there. Day and night, 24-hour periods are all going to be there. Shall not cease as long as the earth remains. Now you go, but there's still floods, Chad. There's been some pretty big floods around the world. It'll never be a universal flood. It'll never be a flood that wipes out all humanity and all the creatures, all the animals. That's the difference. There are still floods, and they're terrible. We've had some pretty close to home. But God says never again will the entire earth be punished. That's his promise. So don't miss that and don't be confused by that. All right. That's chapter 8. Now I just want to look at a small part in chapter 9, just a few verses, and I'm just going to read them to you. This is chapter 9, verse 8. So God's made this promise. This will never happen again. And then look what happens in verse 8. Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, so he says to everybody, behold, I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth with you. As many as came out of the ark, it is for every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you. His point is it's for every living thing. That never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. There'll never be a flood again. And never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you and every living creature that is with you. This is God speaking. What a moment for them. For all future generations, I have set my bow in the cloud. What's that? Rainbow. You seen one of those lately? They're really pretty. And it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. What kind of sign? It's not a sign of victory. It's not a sign of, oh, I hope you remember. That's the kind of punishment that will come upon you because we deserve much worse. It's not that kind of sign. You know what a sign is? It's a sign that says, I am going to protect you. This will never happen again. We'd never have to worry about a worldwide flood. And whenever we forget that, whenever you see a rainbow, may it be a reminder, and it's its purpose, is that God will never bring a flood like he did again. Now let's be honest. For most of us here, we're like, oh, that's great, no flood. Because you haven't experienced it. But for Noah and his family to have witnessed, heard the people scratching on the ark as they're just trying to get in to save their life, building that ark for 120 years, not even sure if it was really going to happen. And then that first raindrop fell and the entire earth was covered. And then they were in an ark where they couldn't see and they were moving around and swinging around. They were in no control of the ark, floating and floating and floating. Months and months and months, and then they get out, and they're maybe thinking it's going to be great, maybe not. They get out, and they see this desolation, and they look, and they say, God, please, please tell us you're never going to do this again. Please tell us we don't have to look over our shoulder, always worrying. Please tell us the next time it rains, because remember when it flooded, that was the first time it ever rained. Tell us that every time it rains, it doesn't mean that another flood is coming. Can you imagine what that meant to them to say that this will never happen again? When God makes a promise, he keeps it. He keeps it. And when I bring clouds over the earth, and the bow is seen in the clouds, this is God speaking, I will remember that it is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it, and remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant that I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. I'll take it one step further. Just looking at what God said here when he said that seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease as the earth remains. You know that means global warming, whatever kind of temperature disaster that we think is coming, it's not going to come. God just told us that. If you think we're going to spin out of orbit and swing off the stratosphere. I don't even know if that's what we think now, but if that's something you think, it's not going to happen because we're going to have 24-hour periods. We're going to have day and night until the earth ends. We don't have to worry about that. And essentially, I really do think it means we don't have to worry about some worldwide disaster. The only Armageddon that's going to happen is when Christ comes back. And if you're right with Christ, it won't be Armageddon. It'll be a homecoming. That's God's promise. So it may rain and it may flood, and we've lost a lot of people to flood, and we've lost a lot of people to tidal wave. But we can be sure that never again will the entire earth be covered by any kind of disaster like that. Now, I want to pull a couple of things before we go. Just really quick, I want to point these out to you. Ladies, I want to say something to you first, and this is going to sound off topic, but it's coming off Noah. What did Noah do when he got off the ark? Got ladies only. What did Noah do? Okay, he made a sacrifice. So what was he doing? Good. He was worshiping. The first thing that Noah did when he got off the ark was he led his family in worship to God. Right? Ladies, if you are with a man that does not go to church, that does not love Jesus, that does not worship God, you are wasting your time. And I'll take it one step further. If he would rather lead you to bed than lead you to God, lead him to the cliff. Or the curb. I said curb. That's nicer. Lead him to the curb. I kind of mean cliff, but I don't think I can actually say that. Hey, but I'm serious. Because I'm going to tell you something. You start being single for a while, and you start going, man, I'll get him to go to church one. It'll be all right. I'll just drag him with me when I go. I'll tell you something. No. It doesn't say that Noah's wife, Noah's sons. No, it said that Noah initiated the worship service to God. And that has not changed through all the generations. Men lead families. Men are supposed to lead the countries. Men are supposed to lead the church. So men, switch it on you. If that doesn't describe you, and you're here now, kudos to you, one night, that's great. If that doesn't lead to you, then guess what? You're going off the cliff or the curb, whatever you choose. It ain't going to work. And you can't just say, well, I'll go to church so I can get the girl, because you will be identified as not fitting in. Because ladies, we don't just go out with guys because they go to church, because that doesn't mean squat. The first thing Noah did was he led his family in worship. Gosh, ladies, please don't miss that. Second thing, remember when the dove was sent out and she picked up that olive leaf and she came back? What did she bring? What would she bring with her? It was like a test. I didn't realize it. This is great. I said it though. What did she bring? What? No. What was that act? How did I describe that? What is that act? What'd you say? All right, y'all, it's cool. We'll have a curve. She, the dove, brought back good news. Yeah, it's all right. There's life out there. There's at least one tree which gives us hope that there's going to be more. That's good news, is it not? If you've been on the ark for that long, sitting next to your brother and driving you crazy, and even your dad's driving you crazy, even though he saved your life, the animals won't shut up, everybody's going crazy, you just want to get off the ark. And you hear the good news that there's life out there, that there's a chance we could make it. That's good news. Can I tell you something? As a Christian, you know what evangelist is? It's someone that shares the gospel, brings the gospel to people. Do you know what the gospel is? The gospel is good news. What's the good news? That Jesus died on the cross. So you don't even have to make that offering like Noah did. He put himself up there so he could be the offering. All you have to do is say yes to Jesus, and he stands in on your behalf. We are called as Christians to be evangelists. We're called to bring good news, just like that dove was sent out. God sends you and I out into the world to bring that good news to people and to bring them home to him. That's part of your job description as a Christian. And the dove just reminds us of that. Number 3, the patience of Noah was incredible. Incredible. I don't know if anyone, at least here, myself included, could ever come close to the kind of patience that he had. I hope so, and I hope maybe one day I could get there. But he had incredible incredible patience. All that time, waiting. Water flowing, rain flowing, water flowing. Are we ever going to get out of here? What's this going to be like? Are we ever going to make it? I imagine every day, especially while those 40 days and 40 nights while the rain was coming, they were just constantly, are we even going to make it? Are we going to make it? Is it ever going to stop? Are we going to make it? We've never even seen rain before. What is happening? The patience that Noah had for what? For God to fulfill what he said, get on that ark. Get on that ark, and he closed him in and he said, trust me. Listen, we need patience like that in our lives. It's not really an option. We need that patience. It's okay to go seek some understanding if you're waiting on a move in your life to make a move. But we got to be patient and wait on the Lord. And when the Lord speaks, that's when we go. And here's the truth. Sometimes we don't get to see the whole thing. Noah was on the ark. They couldn't see. They had windows, but they were covered up according to what was said in here. So that means the whole time they could not see what was happening. You think that was kind of a gift from God? It probably was. Because what they would have seen, especially in the first couple of hours, would have been devastating. But the whole time, as they're waiting, all those days, all those months, God was working all things into motion. All things into motion. And that's what we have to be reminded. Patience comes from trusting God. If you're getting impatient, it could very well be that you simply just aren't trusting God. You don't trust God, so you're getting impatient. If you trust God, for instance, let's just say hypothetically, maybe this is happening, you're getting impatient because you want to find a spouse, or maybe you start with the boyfriend or girlfriend, then move to spouse, but you want to find a spouse, so you're getting really impatient. It's probably because you think that for some reason it's got in your mind that you're never going to find one. But if you know you're going to find one, if you're confident and you trust that if God wants this, He'll bring it, you'll be patient because you know that God always answers His promises. So be careful. Be careful if you're getting impatient about something. Make sure it's not because you don't trust God. And sometimes, look, just like the water, okay, remember this. The water came what? It came really fast. The water advanced really fast, but the retreat was really slow, wasn't it? And life's that way sometimes. Trouble can be that way sometimes. Man, it moves in so quick, but then as it retreats, sometimes it's a slow process. It's patience. It's trusting the Lord. Patience like Noah, knowing that He is in complete control. The rainbow. Every time we see it, I'll be honest, I don't see very many. I've seen a couple, I guess, in my life, but when you see it, it's a really cool sight, especially because we don't see it as much. You see that rainbow, you remember that flood will never come again, ever. But understand this, that rainbow, that promise the flood won't come, doesn't keep us from hell. It doesn't keep us from hell. Only Christ can. And we said it earlier, but Noah built that little altar, and that it was probably a big one, but he built that altar and he made that sacrifice. We don't do that anymore because Christ laid Himself on the cross for you and I. And He gave of His own life. And He said, all you have to do is believe God is there and call on my name, and I will come and I will remove every sin. I will make you clean. I'll make you white as snow. God will never bring a universal flood, but the end is coming and Christ will return. And for those in Christ, it'll be a homecoming. It'll be glorious. You will be so excited because you're going home to paradise in heaven forever with God. But if you're not right with God, it will be the scariest moment ever. Because when He comes back, He's coming with fire. And that's not to scare you. But if you've never thought about that, if you've never processed what that's going to look like, you should think about that. Maybe even tonight, give your life to Christ. Just get right with Him. Begin the journey. The rainbow promises never will there be a flood, but it doesn't keep us from hell. Only Christ. Only a relationship with Christ. And the last one, God is a God of new beginnings. God is a God of new beginnings. What happened, man? They came off the ark, and what was their job? It was to multiply. Make babies. And a lot of them. Because we're all here because they made a lot of babies. That was their job, to go. But what was it? Making babies, yes, it was that too. But making babies, they were making new life. As God said in Genesis 1, he said it again here. We're going to start over. Go, swarm the earth, multiply, create new life. Let's try this again. And God is a God of new beginnings. And when you come into relationship with him, you are made a new creation. And you walk in that, and you hold your head high, and you don't worry about the end because you know you've been made right with Christ. I think, and I kind of came across this as I was studying, I think you have to really get Genesis 8 to really appreciate Romans 8. If you know Romans 8, it talks about God working all things for good. It's a beautiful picture of salvation and what Christ did. But until you realize what could be on the other side, that it could be a flood that destroyed everything. It could be having to do all this on your, it could be all of that. But instead, God made a new promise that that'll never happen again. And then he made an answer, a way for Christ to come for you and I, to have a place to hang on to. He became the sacrifice so that we could be made right with him. So we celebrate Romans 8, but we can't forget Genesis 8. This is where we came from. This is the story of Noah. It's kind of scary when you think about floods. You think about death. You think about those bodies. But listen, God never, ever, 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 ever forgets his own. He never forgets his own. And a day is coming when Christ will return. It won't be a flood, but it'll resemble similarities of that. If you're right with Christ, you will rejoice in that day, and you won't fear it. And that's what we hope. At the end of the day, all the things we do here, everything we do, from every event to every message, every song, is hope that you would step into that right relationship with Christ and walk out of here with your head held high, knowing that the end is going to be a glorious day for you. That's our hope for every one of you. And I pray this story, as we've studied it, has helped us to have either a better picture of that or walk into that for the first time.